Welcome to my channel. World Scene News. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. The year 2025 began with Canada in turmoil. The country was gripped by a sense of unease as political scandals, economic uncertainty, and growing protests swept across the nation. Canadians watched anxiously as their leaders struggled to respond to a rapidly changing world, and the mood on the streets was tense. The air in Ottawa felt heavy, as if the city itself was bracing for a storm. The Liberals, led by Justin Trudeau, were trailing the Conservatives by a staggering 26 points. The polls painted a bleak picture for the governing party, and Trudeau's once bright image had faded under the weight of controversy and fatigue. The opposition, sensing opportunity, grew louder and more confident, while Liberal supporters worried that their party's era was coming to an abrupt end. Trudeau, facing mounting pressure from both inside and outside his party, resigned on January 6, leaving a leadership vacuum at a critical moment. His departure sent shockwaves through the political landscape, and for many Canadians, it felt like the end of an era. The question on everyone's mind: who could possibly step in and unite a fractured party and a divided country? Into this uncertainty stepped Mark Carney, a global financial heavyweight, but a newcomer to Canadian politics. Carney was known around the world for his steady hand during economic crises, having led both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. Yet, despite his impressive resume, he had never held elected office, and many wondered if he could handle the rough-and-tumble world of partisan politics. The Liberals, desperate for a turnaround, quickly rallied behind Carney, who became Prime Minister in March. His appointment was met with cautious optimism. Some saw him as a savior, others as an untested outsider. But with the party in freefall, there was little time for debate. Carney's mandate was clear: restore confidence, unite the party, and prepare for a looming election. Carney inherited a nation anxious about its future, especially with the U.S. under a second Trump administration, now more unpredictable and openly hostile. The relationship between Ottawa and Washington had never been more strained, and every Canadian policy decision seemed to carry international consequences. Carney's experience on the world stage would be tested like never before. Canadians wanted more than economic expertise. They needed a leader who could defend their sovereignty, inspire hope, and chart a new course. The public's expectations were sky high, and the pressure on Carney was immense. He was expected to be both a steady hand and a bold visionary, capable of standing up to foreign threats while healing divisions at home. With a federal election looming in April, Carney had only weeks to prove himself and define his vision. Every speech, every decision, every misstep would be scrutinized by a skeptical public and a relentless media. The countdown to Election Day had begun, and the stakes could not have been higher. He couldn't rely on past party glories. He had to forge his own mandate. The legacy of previous Liberal leaders loomed large, but Carney knew that nostalgia would not win votes or solve the nation's problems. He needed to offer something new, something that would resonate with Canadians facing an uncertain future. The central question: could this respected technocrat handle the political brawling of President Trump? The world was watching, and the outcome would shape not just Canada's future, but the entire North American landscape. Carney's ability to navigate these turbulent waters would be tested in ways no Canadian leader had faced before. The answer would come quickly, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Every hour brought new developments, and the sense of urgency was palpable in the halls of power. The fate of the nation seemed to hang in the balance. Carney's rise wasn't a coronation. It was a crisis appointment. He was thrust into the spotlight not by choice, but by necessity, and the challenges ahead would test his resolve and his leadership like never before. The stakes for Canada had never been higher. As the nation held its breath, all eyes turned to Mark Carney, the new leader tasked with guiding Canada through one of the most turbulent chapters in its history. President Trump wasted no time targeting Canada with aggressive economic measures, signaling a dramatic shift in the relationship between the two neighbors. The tone from Washington was unmistakable: America first, no matter the cost to its closest ally. A 25% tariff slammed into Canadian automobiles, steel, and aluminum, industries that form the backbone of Canada's economy and support hundreds of thousands of jobs. Factories that had operated for generations suddenly faced an uncertain future as costs soared and orders dried up. Trump didn't stop there. He threatened even broader tariffs, sending shockwaves through boardrooms and trading floors across Canada. The threat of an all-out trade war loomed, creating chaos and uncertainty for Canadian businesses of every size. The de minimis exemption, which had allowed small Canadian e-commerce firms to ship goods to U.S. customers with minimal hassle, was scrapped. For many entrepreneurs, this was a devastating blow. Overnight, their access to the world's largest market was choked off, threatening their survival. As the economic pressure mounted, Trump's rhetoric escalated. He floated the idea of Canada as the 51st state, a taunt that stung deeply, striking at the heart of Canadian identity and pride. For many Canadians, it was more than an insult. It was a challenge to their sovereignty. The situation worsened as Trump spread false claims about fentanyl flowing from Canada into the United States, further poisoning relations and fueling suspicion at the border. These accusations, unsupported by evidence, only deepened the mistrust between the two countries. The cumulative effect was profound. A historic partnership, once defined by trust and cooperation, was now pushed to the brink. Diplomatic channels grew tense, and the sense of mutual respect that had endured for decades began to unravel. Canadian businesses and workers felt targeted and betrayed. Protests erupted in cities across the country as people demanded action to protect their livelihoods and national dignity. The economic pain was real, and so was the sense of injustice. The border, once a symbol of friendship and open exchange, now felt like a hostile economic frontline. Cross-border traffic slowed, and the easy camaraderie between Canadians and Americans was replaced by suspicion and frustration. Into this volatile and unpredictable situation stepped Mark Carney. As he took the reins, he faced a nation on edge, its economic future hanging in the balance. Carney was confronted not just with a trade dispute, but with a fundamental challenge to Canada's economic survival and sovereignty. Every decision he made would have far-reaching consequences for millions of Canadians. Across the country, the sense of shared values and common purpose with the U.S. was replaced by a feeling of siege. Canadians watched the news anxiously, wondering what the next day would bring. The Canada-U.S. relationship was at its lowest point in decades. For Mark Carney, the stakes could not have been higher. He had to act fast to defend Canada's interests and restore hope in a time of crisis. Carney knew Canada couldn't afford to be passive. His campaign slogan, "Elbows Up," signaled a new era of toughness. In his first call with Trump, Carney forcefully rejected the 51st state idea and warned that Canada would match every U.S. tariff. True to his word, Canada imposed 25% tariffs on U.S. steel, aluminum, and autos. This high-stakes move risked escalation, but was essential to show Canada wouldn't be bullied. The elbows-up policy was more than tariffs, it was a shift in national posture. Carney gambled that Trump respected strength, not compliance. The public rallied behind Carney's assertiveness. Anxiety turned to defiant solidarity. Canada was ready to fight for its dignity and independence. The message to Washington was clear. Canada would not back down. The trade war had a new, determined adversary. Retaliatory tariffs weren't enough. Carney's government launched the Buy Canadian Doctrine in September 2025. The policy prioritized Canadian suppliers for all government projects, redirecting $70 billion annually into the domestic economy. It was a direct response to U.S. protectionism, aiming to stimulate Canadian manufacturing and jobs. The move boosted morale and gave businesses a guaranteed market at home. Critics warned of higher costs, but the political and symbolic power was undeniable. The Buy Canadian Doctrine became a pillar of Carney's economic nationalism. Canada was rebuilding from the inside out. Despite bold policies and determined leadership, the economic pain was real and impossible to ignore. Across Canada, the effects of the trade war rippled through every sector, leaving communities and families facing an uncertain future. Trump's tariffs hit hard. Steel production dropped 30%, factories slowed, and layoffs mounted. Once busy mills fell silent, and workers who had spent decades on the job suddenly found themselves without paychecks or prospects. The auto industry, deeply tied to U.S. supply chains, faced massive disruption. Assembly lines ground to a halt as parts shipments stalled, and uncertainty spread from the factory floor to dealerships and suppliers across the country. Unemployment ticked up, and small businesses suffered as U.S. market access evaporated. Entrepreneurs who once thrived on cross-border trade now face shuttered doors and mounting debts, with little hope of relief. The end of the de minimis exemption crushed Canadian e-commerce, forcing layoffs and closures. Online retailers, already struggling to compete, saw their customer base shrink overnight as costs soared and deliveries slowed. The Bank of Canada struggled with rising inflation and a slowing economy. Policymakers faced tough choices, balancing the need to support growth with the risk of runaway prices. Business investment stalled, and the dollar fluctuated. Projects were put on hold, and investors hesitated, unsure of what the future might bring. Canadians supported Carney's tough stance, but hardship was everywhere. Around kitchen tables, families worried about bills, while communities rallied together in solidarity. The trade war was no longer just politics, it was daily reality. News headlines blared warnings, and the once busy border crossings slowed to a crawl, affecting everything from tourism to trucking. Communities across Canada felt the squeeze. Food banks saw record demand, and main streets in small towns grew quieter as businesses closed their doors for good. The economic fallout was widespread and personal. For many, the struggle was not just about numbers on a balance sheet, but about keeping a roof overhead and food on the table. The nation's resilience was being tested. Yet, in the face of adversity, Canadians found strength in each other, coming together to help neighbors and support local businesses. The cost of standing up to the U.S. was steep, measured not just in dollars, but in dreams deferred and futures put on hold. But retreat was not an option. Through hardship and uncertainty, the spirit of the Great White North endured, determined to weather the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. Carney's government moved quickly to cushion the blow. The Strategic Response Fund provided $1 billion in non-repayable support to struggling businesses. Immediate loans helped small firms adapt or pivot to new markets. Export development programs and trade missions sought new customers in Europe and Asia. The goal: keep businesses afloat and workers employed. The government's message was clear: no one would be left behind. It was a lifeline in a time of crisis. The trade war forced tough choices on climate policy. Carney reversed the consumer carbon tax, easing pressure on households. Other climate regulations were reviewed to protect vulnerable industries. The zero-emissions vehicle mandate was paused, and clean fuel rules reconsidered. Carney argued that economic strength was essential for a green transition. It was pragmatic environmentalism for a nation under siege. Amid the conflict, support for Canada surged within the U.S. American politicians. Business leaders and citizens spoke out against Trump's tariffs. U.S. industries reliant on Canadian goods lobbied to end the trade war. Editorials praised Carney's principled stand. This cross-border solidarity boosted Canadian morale. It reminded Canadians that the friendship ran deeper than politics. American support became a beacon of hope. The historic bond between the two nations endured. Carney's victory and leadership sent shockwaves worldwide. His approach became a model for countering populist strongmen. Elbows up and buy Canadian were seen as positive nation-building strategies. Carney proved Canada could defend its interests without deference. The trade war forced diversification and renewed domestic investment. Canada emerged more resilient, and the world took note. The lessons of 2025 would not be forgotten.